Stanley's Cup is the South Park episode that shows the least mercy toward its characters. It begins with Stan being reprimanded by his boss for doing a poor job as a paperboy and losing his bicycle when the city council has it towed away. Unable to stop it, he's left on the verge of losing his job and accepts an absurd opportunity to get it back, coaching the Park County Pee Wee hockey team. From the very start, the situation is a disaster. The kids can't play, and the tone turns uncomfortable when Nelson Brown appears, a child with cancer. Things grow darker as Nelson's condition worsens. His parents ask Stan to be the one to tell him that he's going to die.
Nah, I'm just his father. But you're his coach. You're like a father to him.
Nelson accepts it with disturbing calm and makes a single request, that the team win the next game. The match ends in a draw, and the episode openly mocks the sports drama formula when Dr. Doctor declares that Nelson has been left in a cancer limbo, as if his life now depends on a scoreboard. Nelson places all his hope in the next game. If they lose, he will die. Stan tries to give the team even the slightest chance by recruiting Ike, leaning into the idea that Canadians are born hockey experts. At the Pepsi Center, the opposing Pee Wee team never shows up, and Park County ends up playing against the Detroit Red Wings. As expected, the professional players obliterate the children in a humiliating beatdown, shown with deliberately uncomfortable detail. The beating is treated like a heroic triumph. The Red Wings celebrate by lifting the trophy as if they had defeated a legitimate rival, something I find absurdly funny. For some viewers, the joke works precisely because it never backs down. For other longtime fans of South Park, watching professional players beat up children went too far, especially given how explicit the scene is. At the hospital, Nelson says he has no hope left, and dies. That's where the episode defines itself completely. You either love it or you hate it. And that's the point. The episode builds all the cliches of the inspirational sports drama only to tear them apart and deny the viewer the comfort they expect. Everything exists to parody films like Mighty Ducks or Million Dollar Baby. The ending of Million Dollar Baby is something very few people talk about, despite how incredibly tragic and dark it is. The story begins with a boxing match where we're introduced to Frankie, a lonely and reserved trainer, and Maggie, a 31-year-old waitress who dreams of becoming a boxer. Frankie, a conservative Irish man, refuses to train women, but Maggie refuses to give up. She trains alone, endures hunger, pays 6 months of gym fees in advance, and shows up every single day. Eddie, an old friend who works with Frankie, eventually starts helping her. Gradually, Frankie gives in. He lends her equipment, offers advice, and finally agrees to train her under one condition. Once he's taught her everything he knows, she'll have to find another trainer. Maggie improves surprisingly fast for a woman of her age, winning fight after fight, and Frankie, who has always avoided emotional attachment, begins to see her as something more. Having lost contact with his own daughter years ago, Maggie slowly fills that void, while Frankie becomes the father figure she never had. Their bond grows stronger as they travel and win together, until Maggie finally reaches a world title bout. At the peak of her career, everything collapses. Her opponent throws an illegal punch after the bell. Maggie falls, breaks her neck, and is left quadriplegic. Frankie stays by her side, desperately searching for treatments, but there is no hope. Maggie develops gangrene, and her family appears only to steal what little money she has left. She sends them away and makes one final request. She asks Frankie not to let her live like this. Frankie refuses at first, but after Maggie attempts to take her own life, he understands there is no other choice. One night, he enters the hospital, says goodbye, and disconnects her life support. After that, Frankie disappears. No one knows where he went, and he is never seen again. Eddie later writes a letter to Frankie's estranged daughter, explaining that her father vanished after giving meaning to the life of someone who had nothing, leaving it unclear whether he simply walked away or if, having lost the last thing that gave his life purpose, he chose not to go on himself. Boys Don't Cry. The film begins with Brandon, a young transgender man who lives with his cousin. He already dresses as a man and goes on several dates thanks to his appearance. After seeing a girl who believes he is a real man, her brother and his friends go after him to beat him up. Brandon runs away, but his cousin demands that he admit he is a lesbian to avoid trouble. Brandon refuses, insists that he is a man, and is ultimately kicked out of the house, called by his birth name, Tina. Brandon arrives at a bar where he meets Candace and later John and Tom. Amid alcohol, excess, and minor crimes, he meets Lana, with whom an immediate connection forms. For the first time, he feels accepted, and, while hiding his identity with bandages and prosthetics, dreams of escaping with her. The relationship intensifies, but the lies and external pressure grow. Brandon steals a check to pay a fine and is arrested. In jail, he's placed in a women's cell, exposing his identity and reinforcing institutional rejection. Candace discovers the truth and tells Lana, who nevertheless pays the bail and gets him out. The discovery unleashes transphobic violence. John and Tom find the prosthetic and a book about transgender people. Brandon is humiliated, beaten, forced to undress, and sexually assaulted. The attack is meant to punish him and deny his identity. Before leaving him, they threaten him to stay silent. After the abuse, Brandon is shattered and begins to doubt himself. Although the police are informed, indifference and an obsessive focus on his gender delay any real protection. Still, Brandon tries to escape with Lana, clinging to the idea of starting over. The ending is devastating. John and Tom return armed. At Candace's farm, Brandon tries to protect the others. Candace is murdered in front of her child, and minutes later, Brandon is killed in cold blood. The attackers flee, leaving behind a scene marked by hatred and impunity. The closing makes it clear that Brandon never harmed anyone, and that his only crime was existing outside what was considered acceptable. Boys Don't Cry exposes transphobia as a systematic violence that dehumanizes, justifies abuse, and ultimately takes a life, showing how identity, when denied, can become a death sentence. 2.5 Men. It is impressive how the best sitcom ended up having one of the worst endings ever made, and a particularly dark one at that. It is important to remember that the show had lost its original protagonist, Charlie Sheen, years prior. The finale begins with an absurd revelation. Charlie did not die, but was kidnapped for 4 years by Rose, the neighbor and psychopathic stalker who kept him locked up and tortured in a pit. Charlie manages to escape, and from that point on, the entire plot revolves around a question. If there was never a body, why did everyone, including his brother Alan, accept that he passed away? Alan receives a letter regarding $2.5 million in royalties, but discovers the money has already been withdrawn while receiving disturbing signs that confirm Charlie is alive. From that moment on, the series abandons any attempt at traditional comedy and dives into blatant meta-humor. The characters break the fourth wall, speaking as if they knew the series should have ended long ago, and constantly sliding the idea that the show was never the same without Charlie. When Rose reappears, she confirms the entire story. She says that in Paris, Charlie cheated on her with a maid, a mime, and even a goat. Not even Jeffrey Epstein himself dared to go that far, which led her to push him onto the train tracks. Charlie survives, she kidnaps him for 4 years, and he finally escapes. The threats the protagonists receive are now messages loaded with insults and delusional phrases that Charlie Sheen actually said in public interviews. The episode no longer mocks Charlie Harper, it mocks Charlie Sheen, and it does so without disguise. The climax arrives when the police report they have detained a man matching Charlie's exact description. The series plays with the audience's expectations until the very last second. We see a man from behind walking toward the house, and just before his face is revealed, a piano falls from the sky and crushes him. Immediately afterward, the camera pulls back to reveal Chuck Lorre, the showrunner, saying "winning," only to be immediately crushed by another piano, closing the episode in the most grotesque way possible. Finally, it was revealed that Sheen did not participate because Lorre's plan was for him to give a speech about his own stupidity before being crushed. Sheen refused, and Lorre prioritized his ego and revenge over giving the audience a dignified closure, leaving behind one of the most hated endings in sitcom history. Audition. The movie opens with a young boy arriving at a hospital to visit his mother, only to find that she has just died. Years later, father and son seem to have found a quiet routine. The father works in film production and, encouraged by his son and a close friend, begins to consider getting married again. To meet women, the friend suggests organizing a fake casting call for a movie that doesn't exist. Among hundreds of applicants, one woman immediately stands out, a former ballet dancer who had to abandon her career due to an injury. Her fragility, her calm demeanor, and the way she speaks about loss deeply affect him, especially when she describes losing ballet as accepting the death of part of herself. During the audition, the interview shifts from professional to personal. He's already chosen her, even though an uneasy feeling lingers. They start dating, and the relationship moves fast. She appears shy, gentle, and vulnerable, saying that he's the only person who's ever tried to truly understand her. At the same time, his friend starts digging into her past and finds disturbing inconsistencies. People connected to her have vanished, places where she claimed to work have been closed for years, and no one seems to really know her. These warnings are ignored. After a weekend trip together, she disappears completely. Obsessed, the man searches for answers and uncovers fragments of her past filled with abuse, cruel discipline, mutilation, and disappearances. Back at home, the man drinks whiskey without realizing he has been sedated. From here on, the film descends fully into horror. Through dreams and memories, it's revealed that she kept a man captive for a year, mutilated him, and fed him with her own vomit. Everything leads toward punishment. He wakes up paralyzed. She has killed his dog and calmly prepares her tools. She injects him with a substance that keeps him conscious but unable to move, accusing him of being like all men who judge, use, and discard women. Slowly and methodically, she inserts thin needles into the most painful parts of his body, making sure he feels everything. Then, using a surgical wire saw, she amputates his foot, repeating that he must love only her. When the son unexpectedly returns home, she tries to attack him, but falls down the stairs and dies. The film ends with the police arriving, the father left mutilated, and her final words echoing the same idea. She waited a long time for that call, regrets what she did, and only wanted to be loved by him. Seven's ending. It left audiences stunned when it first came out in the 90s, and even decades later, people still talk about that final twist. The story follows two detectives, Somerset, a disillusioned veteran on the verge of retirement, and Mills, a brash young cop eager to prove himself. Together, they investigate a string of grotesque murders committed by a meticulous killer who uses the 7 deadly sins as his blueprint. Each crime scene is crafted with disturbing precision, and with every new victim, the horror escalates. But all of that is just the buildup. When they finally identify the killer, John Doe, he turns himself in voluntarily, but he has one condition. He'll reveal the location of the 2 remaining victims, but only if Somerset and Mills personally accompany him to a remote location outside the city. What follows is one of the most tense and disturbing twists in modern cinema. In the middle of the desert, under a scorching sun, a van arrives with a package. Somerset opens it and is consumed by horror. Inside is Tracy's head, Mills' wife. Meanwhile, John Doe, disturbingly calm, explains that he murdered her out of envy. That was his role, envy, and now he needs Mills to complete the cycle. He also reveals something even more devastating. Tracy was pregnant, a fact Mills didn't know. The tension snaps. Somerset pleads with Mills not to give Doe what he wants, but it's too late. Mills loses control and fires again and again, and in that moment, the killer wins. John Doe had orchestrated everything from the start. He was envy. Mills, in his rage, becomes wrath. The 7 sins are complete, the perfect crime from the most twisted mind imaginable. Mills is left broken emotionally, morally, psychologically. As he's taken away, Somerset stands behind, shattered. He closes the case with the famous line, "The world is a fine place and worth fighting for." I agree with the second part. Silent Hill 2 has multiple endings, some of them very bizarre, but today we'll focus on the canonical one. The story follows James Sunderland, a man who receives a letter from his wife Mary, who died 3 years earlier from an illness. In the letter, Mary tells him she is waiting for him in Silent Hill, a town where they once spent a vacation together. Without questioning the impossibility of the message, James travels there and enters a city shrouded in constant fog, abandoned and filled with creatures, as if the place itself were reacting to his mind and his guilt. During his search, James believes he sees Mary in the distance, but instead he encounters Maria, a woman who looks almost identical to her. Maria resembles Mary physically, but her personality is different. She is more outgoing, more provocative, and more emotionally present. Even so, she decides to accompany James, reinforcing his hope that Mary might still be alive somewhere in the town. That hope is repeatedly shattered. In an abandoned hospital, Maria falls ill, disappears, and later reappears, accusing James of only caring about his dead wife. Shortly after, a monstrous figure with a pyramid-shaped head brutally murders her in front of him, impaling her, while James is powerless to intervene. Later on, James encounters Maria alive once again, locked away, and speaking as if she remembers intimate moments he shared with Mary at a hotel during their vacation. However, when he tries to save her, he finds her dead yet again, her body covered in wounds identical to those Mary suffered before dying. The key moment occurs when James reaches an old hotel in the town and plays a videotape recorded during his vacation with Mary. At first, it shows happy memories, but then it reveals the truth. James suffocated Mary with a pillow in the hospital. The illness had destroyed her body and their relationship, and while James wanted to convince himself it was an act of mercy, it was also an act of selfishness and exhaustion. The letter, the journey, and Maria's very existence were all ways of denying that truth. In the end, Mary represents the truth James tried to erase. Maria is the impossible replacement created to escape the pain. And Silent Hill acts as a mirror that forces the protagonist to face his crime and decide whether he deserves to keep living or sink beneath the weight of his guilt. Omori is a game that, despite its cute aesthetic, hides a deeply dark story. The plot alternates between white space and headspace, dreamlike worlds where Omori goes on adventures with his friends, and the real world, where we discover that he is actually Sunny, an isolated boy with his house up for sale, his parents separated, and his sister, Mari, dead. From the very beginning, a disturbing memory is foreshadowed, a broken violin at the bottom of a staircase. As the story progresses, Basil disappears, headspace begins to empty, and Sunny is forced to face the truth. Everything culminates in black space, a realm formed by repressed memories and guilt. There, what really happened is revealed. While preparing for a recital, Sunny pushed Mari down the stairs, killing her. Basil suggested staging it as a suicide to protect them both, giving birth to the guilt that has haunted them ever since. At the climax, Sunny confronts Omori, his other half. After losing the fight, the game asks whether he wants to continue. Choosing yes leads to the good or true ending. This decision symbolizes Sunny's desire to move forward and free himself from Omori in order to tell the truth. Unable to defeat him physically, Sunny appeals to emotion and does what he could never do on the day of Mari's death. He plays the final recital duet with her. Omori collapses and disappears, leaving Sunny with full control of his mind. Sunny wakes up in the hospital and finally confronts his friends. In the hallway, he can choose to follow his dream friends or a strange version of Basil. The latter path leads him to confess the truth about Mari's death. After doing so, the weight of guilt begins to fade. If instead Sunny chooses not to continue, the bad ending is reached. Sunny gives up and Omori takes full control. Sunny walks to the hospital balcony and jumps from the roof. Sunny never faces his friends or confesses the truth, abandoning himself completely to the silence of his fate.